In this video, we would be discussing an epic battle happened between Magnus Carlsen versus Praggnanandhaa from the Norwich Chess 2024. The battle is already very interesting as the classical game ended in a draw, and now we have the Armageddon where Magnus is playing with the white pieces and he's having 10 minutes on his clock, whereas Praggnanandhaa is playing with the black pieces with 7 minutes. And if Magnus wants to win, he has to win the game, or else if the game ends in a draw, Praggnanandhaa will win the game. So let's start. I don't want to waste any further time. The game is simply exciting. So Magnus with the white pieces starts the game with 1d4, knight f6, and now we have the London system, one of the favorite openings to play with the white pieces of Magnus Carlsen. d5, e3, bishop to f5. So if you're a complete beginner player, London opening is one of the best opening I would like to recommend you guys because it's easy to learn. It's a very interesting opening. It covers every fundamental, and yeah, it's a very good opening. Bishop f5, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop d6. We have a bishop trade, queen b3, attacking the b7 pawn, b6, knight f3, short castle, bishop e2, takes, and now we have the move a6, covering the b5 square, because or else, if for example something like knight d7, already knight b5 and white can capture the pawn. So going back, that's why we have first a6, and now a knight b7, and now simply b5, and now c5. Takes, knight to d4, attacking the bishop went back, bishop f3, and now we have the move rook to a7, as the rook was simply hanging. A better move, I personally believe, would have been bishop h5, which is a very interesting move. We're basically forcing white to trade off the bishop pair, because if you try to capture the rook, black can also capture the rook. It's all the same. So after takes, now black can capture with the queen, and the game is actually ending towards a draw. So I think it would have been much more interesting, but okay, rook a7 is still fine move. Rook a c1, queen to g5, and now we have the move knight to c6. If white plays something like queen a3, it would have been much better, because after queen to a3, you basically have some ideas with the knight to b5. And after, for example, after knight c5, as the bishop is hanging, so bishop e2. And I personally believe white is still having the edge in this position, as the b5 is extremely weak, and if the rook moves from the a file, the a6 pawn is going to collapse. So it would have been much better, but knight c6 turned out to be a bad move, as black is having a very strong move in this position, which is knight to e5. What's happening? If you take the rook, black can already capture the bishop, and you can't really recapture the knight because the pawn is pinned. And now this position is already winning for black, because for example, if you try to move your king now, already knight g4 is coming up, knight f2, knight h2, and the game is already over. So that's why knight into e5 was played in the game. Takes, and I can already sense the position is even, and maybe it would end in a draw. a4 but trying to create a weakness. Takes, and now at the place of capturing the a4 pawn, Magnus first plays queen to b6, attacking the rook, queen to b8, knight a4, and now we have the move h6, bishop to e2, and now we have the move knight to d5. I believe after bishop e2, Praggnanandhaa should have traded off the queen, as it reduces the chances of losing, and at the same time it increases the chances of drawing the game after rook b8, rook c7, and I believe the game could be ended in a draw. But instead we have the move knight to d5, and now Magnus simply took the queen back, a5, knight c5, and now we have the move queen to b6. And after knight c5, this is already a position which is very uncomfortable to play with the black pieces. For example, if black plays something like queen b4, it's already a bad move after knight into e6. What's happening? Basically, I have already captured the pawn. So if you try to capture the knight, I can capture the rook. So you kind of have to capture the queen, or else if you try to move your queen back, and I can already capture the rook followed by capturing the knight. It's already winning. So black has to capture the queen, whereas in this position, white is already a pawn up and winning the game. That's why it's already a bit hard to play with the black pieces, but Praggnanandhaa find the move queen to b6, which is a very interesting move, because this time knight into e6 is not really working. After fe6, the queen is already protected by the knight. So that's why we have the move bishop to f3, and now rook to b8, defending the queen now. Takes, and now we have to move first b3. If you take the pawn after queen into b2, the game is even. So first protecting the pawn, and now knight to e6, a very strong move. You have to trade off the queens or you are going to lose the rook. For example, if you even try to go for capturing the rook, queen g7 is a mate. So that's why you have to trade off the queen, it's a force. Takes, and now we have the move rook c8. But the whole difference in this endgame here is, engine shows it's already like slightly better for white, but practically speaking up, white is already having a very decisive advantage, and white can play this endgame as long as he wants, because it's basically a good knight versus bad bishop endgame, which is usually extremely comfortable endgame for white. So basically what is happening here is, we have rook a1 and bishop to c2. I believe rook c5 would have been much more interesting and a good move, simply holding on to the pawn, but bishop c2, and now we have rook to c1. If you trade off the bishop, it's already a bad move, because after takes, rook b2, white is a pawn up indeed, but it's a rook endgame, most likely it would end in a draw. So we have rook c1, bishop to d3, and now Magnus simply traded one pair of rooks, f3, as we cannot capture the pawn again because it would be a mate. So first f3 was played, rook c5, king f2, activating the king, and now we have rook to c1. And after bishop f5, Praggnanandhaa is already making a commitment, saying that if you wanna just destroy my pawn structure, you can, but it's still a draw as it's a rook endgame. So the moment rook enter into the army camp, it's already a draw. So that's why it's not really the best idea. So instead we have rook c1, takes, because after rook c1, black is not really having squares, but kind of forced to trade off the rooks. And now it's a pure knight versus bishop endgame, where the knight is simply good compared to the bishop. So we have bishop g7, king b2, king c3, and slowly and steadily Magnus tried to push. First weaknesses are removed, and now we have slowly play on the king side. So it's already very interesting to see. Knight f4, bishop to b3, h4, bishop a2, g4, takes. And now Magnus has already tried to make a pass pawn on the edge of the board. So king e7 was played, which is already not the best, but you kind of have to give up the pawn. King e6, e4, bishop here, check here, bishop c2, and now in the game we had bishop d3. But here's the critical moment where Praggnanandhaa was really having the chance to draw the game. You can pause the video and try to find the move. Okay, it's already very hard to find it. The move is king f8. And what's the whole idea? Basically the whole idea here is, the king can't really advance, because if the king moves forward, the pawn is simply hanging on e4. So first king d4, and white have to give a check in order to protect the pawn. But the whole point here is, the moment white king comes forward, now black can simply play king e7, just not allowing white king to get forward. And now if white just goes like from the other way, king c6, king e6, I'm still not allowing white king to get forward. King c7, king e7, not allowing king to come forward, and if the knight moves, the pawn is collapsing and it's a draw. So going back a bit, instead if white tries to push the pawn, now it's all draw after bishop check, bishop e6, and now you can already sense that white is already having a nice fortress and it should be ended in draw, which computer agrees. But still it's very hard, as it's an Armageddon and Praggnanandhaa is only having 12 seconds. So instead we have bishop to d3, king to f8, and now as you can already sense that white's king has already entered into the black camp, and now white can already advance, which was exactly happened. King e7. You can't really trade because it would be a lost endgame for black, as white is having 3 pawns. So bishop b1, knight here, bishop c2, and now Magnus just rerouting his pieces, and now finally a nice blow, knight into f7. And now you kind of have to trade, or else you're going to simply down 2 pawns. So takes, and now simply e6, a winning move. because if you take, it's a winning, like just here, and you can capture the pawn and win the game. So instead we have bishop to g8, but now king to d7, and it's and after king d7, Praggnanandhaa decides to resign the game because you can't really help anything. You have to take, or else if you try to come, like, or else you are not really having any move. For example, over here, check, and just to make a queen, and it's winning. So that's why after just king d7, Praggnanandhaa resigned the game, and a very instructive and like basically a very good knight versus a bad bishop game was happening in this particular game, which was very informative. As I said, it's basically a completely good knight versus bad bishop. It doesn't matter if the engine says it's a draw. Practically speaking, it's extremely hard for black to hold this into a draw. That's exactly what happened. Even if you are just Magnus Carlsen playing with the black pieces or Praggnanandhaa, it's extremely hard for black to even hold a draw in this position, because it's already a good knight versus bad bishop position. So yeah guys, that's it for today. This video was very instructive, and if you learned anything from this game, I personally believe the chapter was good knight versus bad bishop endgame. So yeah, so that's it for today. If you learned anything new, make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel. I'm going to come up with these instructive videos like this. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching OneShot Chess.